Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we're talking with John Luizzi about ransomware events and the crisis management and leadership needed to manage those events. John, great first segment there. I want to carry on from what you were just saying at the end of segment one. How do we escalate the fact or communicate the fact that we found an issue if we're an employee, or how do we communicate that there is an issue if we've heard from a hacker saying, knock, 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 guess what, guys? I got some news for you.
Well, typically, if I'm a user on a network and I'm seeing some anomalies, or hey, I actually have a screen that says, hey, you've been ransomed, stuff like that. I mean, the first level of escalation obviously goes to your IT help support desk, your cyber incident response team, for them to be able to kind of actually confirm that what has transpired, right? So, I mean, once they are engaged associated with that, they will do the necessary, forensics and investigation to determine the validity of the attack, right? And potentially start to look at what the extent of that attack might be. So they have I'll call it a ransomware playbook or an incident response playbook that they would be executing at that point. And then, once they can kind of confirm that there is a legitimacy associated with the attack and what it is, then they would engage the crisis management team, which kind of starts with the your legal counsel associated with that, because now you have things that are now under a client privilege attorney type of a situation
Mhm.
from a liability perspective and from a communications perspective, right? So so your legal counsel's engaged, your crisis management team, which is everything from your C-suite executives, and depending upon what your company, how you define your crisis management team is, right? And then from there, if it is determined that there is a ransomware attack, then potentially there's decisions that have to be made associated with containment of that. Will it spread throughout the network to other systems, or is it contained to one or two systems associated with that? So there has to be some assessment of that. And then, from a business perspective, the crisis management team is going to have to decide, what do we do? Do we suspend business operations? Do we continue in this mode? Can we continue? What works? What doesn't work? I mean, those are kind of the decisions that have to be made in real time by the crisis management team. And that's obviously an evolving situation as more and more information is reported, and the IT group does a little more forensic analysis associated with that. It'll be determined, what is the next step and how do we move forward, right? So, and from there, then you're activating, your response teams internally, right? So it could be your internal teams, mostly your IT teams, your facilities teams, that type of your operational teams. And then it's also, you have, as part of your crisis management team, every organization should have, an external response team, which includes potentially a ransomware negotiator, which is someone who is skilled in the art of, negotiating a ransom specifically, and has some tools that can potentially help mitigate those situations. Then there's law enforcement that would get involved. I mean, what a lot of folks don't realize is that once you are now been ransomed, your network is now a crime scene.
Mhm.
So as a result, in the U.S., like for FBI and that type of thing, would get involved associated with that, and do some type of investigation. And once that starts happening, potentially there is assets that are seized because of stuff like that. So because they're trying to do a criminal investigation, right? And then you have your cyber insurance, company would be involved, because they obviously have some resources that potentially they can help support, as well as just understanding exactly what has transpired through the internet. And then very important is also having a public relations firm, because now you're going to need some way to start communicating, properly and effectively to all of your, stakeholders, customers, your suppliers, your vendors. What's the message that you want to send associated with that? Hey, we've had a business interruption, and this is what we're doing right now. And then as the event continues to unfold, depending upon what is discovered associated with that, then there's certain communications that are sequenced that would explain the situation and essentially what the status of the business is, right? um, so again, you're notifying all of your stakeholders, and then from there, then the organization potentially has to make a decision about whether or not we're gonna decrypt. Are we gonna try to negotiate, or are we going to try to just restore? Are we just going to say, you know what, we're not going to pay any ransom. We're just going to hit the reset button in all of our systems, and restore everything, and do that. So if they're gonna go through and have they agreed to pay the ransom, then there's potentially a negotiation, a payment decision associated with that, and depending on how successful that is, nobody ever gets. I've never heard of anybody that ever gets back all of their data. So you may negotiate that and whatever that price is associated with that, but I've never heard of anybody that got back all of their data. They get some of their data back, functionality. The other thing to realize that, when someone does fully pay ransom and stuff like that, doesn't mean that you're going to get, there's no time frame expressed when you're going to get your keys back associated with being able to, restore your systems. That could be an hour, 24 hours, 48 hours. You just don't know associated with that. So you have to kind of build that into your thinking process. That just because you paid a ransom doesn't necessarily guarantee anything. So, a lot of companies, that's why a lot of companies decide, hey, you know what, we're not gonna pay the ransom. We're just gonna move forward and reset our systems and go from there and
Mhm.
go through that process and whatever that is. And again, that's a big part of that depends upon the level of maturity of their business continuity plans and the integrity of their backups to be able to facilitate that. And but in the meantime, you're probably doing some manual processes before you actually, are able to restore, full operations utilizing your automated system. So that's the process essentially. So
A few questions
sure,
here. One, you just talked about not getting all the data back, potentially not getting it all back.
sure,
And I guess a part of a business unit, whether it be finance or whoever, depending on what data is missing or you're not getting, should have some sort of a plan to recreate some of this data.
right.
Even if they don't know what's missing, how would we get data back if we're lost? What partners do they need to, I'm guessing,
Yeah,
reaching out to
no,
different partners, right?
right. Oh man, you definitely need to have a very intimate relationship with your data to know when you're in this situation. So when it comes back to you, or it's restored, whatever that is, that it comes back to you intact. I mean, there have been ransomware cases that have been where the ransom was paid, and the bad actors provided the data or released the data back to the company, and the data all everybody went through and reviewed the data, all looked good. What nobody realized until a couple of days later was what the bad actors actually did. They actually took the data, the financial data, and they moved the decimal point one place to the left.
Oh,
So they altered it, right? Which
mm,
completely, just think about all the financials and you just move it to one place to the left. What that does to the dollar value associated with that, right? So it's not a question, so it's a question of understanding, really being very intimate with your data, because you really need to understand potentially if it was altered, even though potentially may have been restored and given back to you and given access back to you. But what is it in the condition that's what I would call operationally ready?
yeah. And so that leads me to another question. What or when do I tell the users? Because you went through the process, which was great. However, depending on where the data breach is, where the issue is, what data sets are corrupt, I may still be working away on my computer and having no clue that there's even an issue going on.
Sure.
So when should I be told as a user, like, hey, you should stop because we have to, either recreate this data or we have to pay to get all that data back, and then you're gonna have to re-enter it anyway. So when do you tell other groups? Because I know you, as part of the process, cyber team and some others are doing their assessment. They're finding out what the best course of action is, the extent of the issue, but users are still going away doing things. So when do we tell them and what do we tell them?
Well, essentially, they would be notified once, that IT forensic team that's doing the investigation determines that potentially that system's been impacted, right? Until that point, they really wouldn't know. It's
Okay.
really when that forensic team is doing the analysis, that they would determine that that system potentially or the data has been impacted, therefore should be taken offline until it can actually be, further analysis, investigation, and cleaned, whatever that is, and decrypted, whatever that is. But it's at that point that you're relying upon your IT incident response team to do that comprehensive assessment of your systems to determine the impact. And not only are they looking at their what I would call their security controls and monitors and sensors that are built into their network, but they're also relying upon, hey, who's calling that? Is there people calling the help desk and
Hmm.
reporting issues and stuff like that? So it's also, actual user experiences that are also building into potentially, helping them identify issues. So
Yeah, that would be interesting. Try people calling into a call center and they're either reporting issues or they're not having issues, but things are being changed. Meanwhile, the forensic team is discovering that everything that user is typing in or updating is completely kaput.
yeah, that's right. That's right. But they wouldn't even know about it until somebody
Yeah.
actually told them about it. Exactly. So that's the challenge of these type of situations, these type of attacks. So
So when there is a cyber event, who's in charge? I know you talked about the crisis management team, and a lot of organizations have a structure in place with a designated person. Um, However, I've noticed in a lot of places recently, even my last two clients, when there's a cyber event, they seem to have a different process or structure, I should say, even though they're calling it the same thing, crisis management team. So who's in charge?
well, typically from a legal perspective, because what it is that there's also a legal general counsel that also, because there's so many liability issues associated with that and data breach potential, loss of information. It's typically the legal team that has the lead on this, that coordinates the overall incident response for a ransomware situation, and then they disposal. They have outside legal counsel, and they're the one that's providing direction to, or advice counsel to the leadership team, the C-suite, and then obviously to the public relations firm that would be working with, overall communication, that type of thing.
Hmm.
But they're the ones that are essentially leading the effort associated with the cyber attack of this nature, which is different from, like, when I have like a hurricane situation or some other type of natural disaster situation. I'm the one that's in charge associated with
Hmm.
that, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm part of the incident response team for ransomware, but it's not it's because of the implications associated with the company and their reputational issues and the communication. It's really governed. It's managed through a legal counsel. Yeah.
But I'm assuming IT would still be doing what
Oh,
they
of
need to
course.
do, right? Like they
Oh,
wouldn't
of
be,
course. Yeah.
because I can't imagine the legal team knowing, okay,
Right.
yeah, rebuild this LPAR in the
No,
mainframe or
not at
whatever
all.
the case may
No,
be.
not at all. I mean, you're talking about overall, strategy,
Hmm.
governance,
Yeah,
communication management, that type of thing in general. So, but yeah, but all the tactical stuff is still done by the different functional areas, whether it's, IT, operations, facilities, security, whatever those things still fall in line. Absolutely.
yeah. The reason I was asking that is because one of the examples that I've seen recently didn't have legal in it. And they had the director of cybersecurity all of a sudden taking over basically everything, would tell IT how to rebuild things and all this and that. And I told them straight out, I said, that's not going to work. I said, because all of a sudden you've got someone in charge who knows nothing about rebuilding applications or servers or anything like that. I said, so you're going to have a bigger problem on your hands, you
Yeah, I
know?
mean, because if once you get into a ransomware attack, I mean, you have legal liabilities, potentially have
Mm,
lawsuits, you have regulatory compliance issues. You have payment of ransom. If you're gonna go down that road, there could be litigation, there could be media stakeholder communications. So there's so many employee relations. So there's so many aspects of the situation that that needs to make sure that it has the appropriate, general legal counsel associated with providing guidance to make sure that the company operates within compliance, associated with that, as well as, provides the appropriate, communications, resources, documentation to the appropriate, law enforcement and other governing authorities. Absolutely.
well, we're going to take a break now, but I do have questions for you about how we bring in some of these other teams, disaster recovery, business
Sure.
continuity, et cetera, and what they're expected to do, and how we deal with our external partners. Because you gave a great example earlier on about a hacker may have my data, but they only have a portion of it that deals with a different client and blackmailing another client for me to get me to pay. So I thought, okay,
Exactly right.
that's an interesting little piece there to talk about. So
Sure.
we're going to be right back. We're talking with John Luizzi today about managing ransomware events, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.